Good afternoon. Delighted to have the opportunity to come here and share with you some preliminary findings from a study that I have been working on for a couple of years. It just took quite a long time to collect the data, and I am delighted that I will be able to share some of the findings today and also get some feedback because this is still an ongoing project. Now the title, I have modified it a little bit, but it still has to do with economics, culture, and entrepreneurship. So let me go to the, I have to be stationary because you're, okay, all right. Oh, okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the larger project before I focus on today's presentation. The larger project is a investigation, if you will, of entrepreneurship in society. And this project was motivated by two factors. One is there has been a widely accepted assumption in the academic literature and maybe even in the world of practice too, that entrepreneurship contributes to innovation, and that innovation will contribute to economic growth and job creation. So this is really, a very positive and a very rosy, if you will, view of entrepreneurship. And yet, if you really dig deep into the empirical literature, the research literature, you will find that there's not a solidly built empirical base for this postulated relationship. As a matter of fact, some of the recent research has found that the impact of entrepreneurship on the economy, or on economic growth and innovation, etc., is all contingent on the societal context in which entrepreneurship takes place. So what that means is that, we as academic researchers, we should really dig deeper to find out, why this postulated relationship is so widely held, and then where are the mixed findings, and see if we can reconcile the conflicting findings. So it is under these two, if you will, motivational factors that I started this project a few years back, and this project is still ongoing. So as a very brief summary, the project has to do with investigating the antecedents and the consequences of entrepreneurship within a societal context. And then specifically today's presentation focuses on two factors as antecedents to entrepreneurship. One is economic-based government support programs, and then the other one has to do with societal culture. So I'm going to specifically focus on those two factors for today's talk. But if you are interested in some other factors, of course, I would be happy to answer questions later on. So let's go to the. I'm sorry. I thought I had all the things. Well, tell you what, I may have to come over here so I will know what I'm showing on the screen. Okay. So basically, this is what I have been talking about for the last several minutes. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about government support programs. Everywhere you go these days, whether it's developed countries or developing countries, you will find that governments are so excited about innovation and entrepreneurship. And they will create programs and put money behind all these programs, hoping that all these programs will generate a return on their investment. And then the two types of programs that have been commonly created are one focusing on the entrepreneurs, giving entrepreneurs economic incentives, and then the other one given to both entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized companies, try to help them become more efficient, partly by reducing transaction costs in the market. Now, but what happened is if you look into the literature really deep, you will find that the research findings are mixed. There's really not an overwhelming consensus in support of this postulated relationship, that if you put money into government programs, then there will be a lot of entrepreneurship coming out. And there are several reasons, I suppose, for the weak relationship. One has to do with the studies are all over the place, if you will, in terms of how they define entrepreneurship. So that's really not a common definition. So as a result, a lot of the mixed findings may be due to the different ways the studies operationalized entrepreneurship. But then at the same time, there are so many different types of entrepreneurship that researchers did not take account of. And as a result, you cannot really accumulate the research findings and build a theory. So what we are trying to do first is, let me show you all the lines here, and then I can talk a little bit more about this, is to dig deeper into the literature on entrepreneurship to find out how different researchers have defined the concept. And as I have shown on this slide here, there are just so many definitions there, and it is so difficult for anyone to try to accumulate knowledge across studies. But a systematic analysis of all the definitions will boil down to the following key terms, if you will. One is a lot of the definitions refer entrepreneurship to the creation of a new business. So you can talk about recognition of opportunity, you can talk about all these other aspects of entrepreneurial activity, but fundamentally entrepreneurship has to do with the creation of a new business. So that tends to be a fairly commonly assumed, accepted definition if you look across all the definitions. And then the other aspects had to do with the new business itself. It has to do with the market aspect of it, the production aspect of it, and also the product aspect of it. So what I did with my co-investigators is we created a typology of entrepreneurship, if you will. So let me show you the typology here. So there are three dimensions that we are going to use as a basis for defining a new business creation, or creating a new business, and also to try to classify it. So one dimension is that this new business is created to serve an existing market or a new market. And then the other one is this new business is selling an existing product with some improvement or a brand new product or service. And then the third is that this product is created or produced, if you will, using existing technologies or using new technologies. So with these three dimensions, and each dimension can be old versus new, basically we can have 8 unique types of new business ventures. And that will allow us to compare across studies of entrepreneurship. Because if you just go to the literature, you will find that some of the studies are actually looking at a very innovative, technology-driven or high uncertainty type of entrepreneurship to the right side of the table. And then some of the studies focus on the more mundane small businesses. Like if you create or if you start a McDonald's, and then open the store at the opposite side of the city, that's really not a very innovative type of entrepreneurship, but that is still called entrepreneurship because you start a new business there. So if you look at the table here, then you create a franchise or open a new franchise of a federal, well, as a matter of fact, I have the examples over here. So if you open a FedEx store on the other side of the city, basically using the same things that have been done all the time, then you're not really a highly innovative type of new business. But on the other hand, if you go to the right-hand side, the Apple home computer, many, many years ago, it was considered as really something original and innovative. it opens up a new market because up until then, most of the computers, if not all of them, were bought by universities or businesses with a mainframe and so on and so forth. So with the home computer, basically Apple created a new market. It's not serving an old market, it's created a new market. And then it's a new product. It's not a mainframe, it's a desktop. And then it also had some kind of a new architecture and a way of producing the computer. So you can say that on this side, towards the right-hand side, these new businesses are a lot more creative, if you will, than the ones on the left-hand side. So what we did was we tried to come up with a typology so that we can compare and contrast the different studies that have been published in the literature and see if the conflicting findings across them can be explained in terms of the different types of entrepreneurship. So that's one of the things I want you to keep in mind as we move forward to look at the findings I'm going to report to you. Now, I'm going to go over this rather quickly here because I want to have more time for Q&A. If you go back to the typology that I showed you on the last slide, you see that there are three dimensions: the market dimension, the product dimension, and the production dimension. Now, we can think of each of these as a value-driven proposition, or as a way to create value, if you will, for the customer. Now, most of the new businesses usually are driven by only one dimension. Like the example I gave, if you open up a new FedEx store on the other side of the city, then they're basically serving an existing or an expanded market, but it is the same product or service and the same method of delivering the service or product. So you can actually start a new business with only one driver of the three. But then if you look at the ones on the right-hand side that I showed you earlier, like Apple computer, the home computer, it was driven by all three drivers. So what that means is that if you go to the right-hand side of the typology, there's a lot more of risk, a lot more of uncertainty. But at the same time, if you succeed, the payoff is really huge because you have three ways to generate revenue or three ways of creating value. So that is the trade-off here. It is more risky and more uncertain, but at the same time, if you can make it work, you will be enjoying the big payoff from a successful new business venture. Now, the last line is the most important one. Because these new business ventures are so risky and are so difficult to launch and also to manage, you will need a lot of supporting conditions in order to, first of all, start the new business, and then secondly of all is to maintain it. So keep this in mind because this is something that I want to go to the next slide, which has to do with societal culture. Early on, we looked at government support programs, primarily the programs that are based on economic incentives or economic rationale in terms of reducing transaction costs. So most of the initiatives that you find in the literature about government programs are economics-based, are not addressing the issues of whether the societal culture is supportive of entrepreneurship. So that's where I'm going to move to next. All right. So just to start with a very basic and general definition of societal culture. It has something to do with values and norms of a society that predispose a person to behave in a certain way. Or you can say that it guides behavior. And then if you look at entrepreneurship as an activity, and there's a lot of debate in the literature as to whether entrepreneurship is an individual activity or is it a group activity. And I support the argument that at least at the early stage of new business creation, where a person is identifying or sometimes creating an opportunity, that is primarily an individual activity, not a group activity. And then secondly, it is more a activity that's self-motivated. It's not so much that someone pushes you to do it. particularly in regard to the high risk and high uncertain type of a new business. So if you accept that argument, then we would argue that most of the new businesses that are out there, particularly the innovation-driven new businesses, are motivated by what we call intrinsic factors or intrinsic motivation, as opposed to extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation would be more economic incentives. Intrinsic motivation would be something that you feel that you want to do it despite all the obstacles, etc. And then you derive satisfaction from doing it, and then you will be self-actualizing if you were. That is the whole argument in the psychology literature. All right. Now, well, in the working paper, we have a lot more discussion as to how we derive these three propositions. But let me just show you the three propositions here. One is that if you compare societal culture that is supportive of entrepreneurship to the economics-based government programs, our prediction or our argument is that societal culture, the supportive societal culture, if you will have a greater impact and also a more enduring impact on entrepreneurship than economic-based government programs. Where's my water? Okay. And here we are predicting that this will be true for both the level or the quantity, if you will, of new businesses or new business creation, and also the innovativeness of the type of new businesses that you see in that society or in that country or economy. So that is proposition one. And then proposition 2 and 3 basically talk about venture innovativeness. So again, if you go back to my typology, you will see that those more on the right-hand side, we will call those more innovative than the one on the left-hand side. Those on the right-hand side tend to involve higher risk and higher uncertainty, but they also have higher payoff if you are successful. So here our prediction is that the effect of societal culture on entrepreneurship, both the level, and in this case particularly the level, will increase as venture, the new business ventures, innovativeness increases. And conversely, now that is the part that I would like to talk to the government officials about, is that conversely, the effect of the economics-based government programs on new business creation will decrease. I mean, those programs will become basically useless or have very little impact on new business creation for those innovation-driven business ventures. Okay, so those are the three propositions. Now, I don't have the data to test all these three in a very rigorous way. What I'm going to show you is some very preliminary data, some very preliminary results based on data from 10 economies. Now, I created some kind of acronym for each of the 5 countries block, if you will. On the east, I have what I call the KICH, South Korea, India, Taiwan, China, and Hong Kong. And then on the western side, I have the GUSIA, if you will. Just help me to remember them. Great Britain, USA, Canada is on it, Australia is on it, and Israel. Israel is in particularly very interesting. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later. All right. And what I've been doing is during the last 2-3 years, I have been working with a team of colleagues plus research assistants to comb through, if you will, all the published data from these 4 sources: the World Bank, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitoring, World Economic Forum, and Financial Times. They have yearly surveys and also data collection across a large number of countries. But most of the data you really need to be careful because it's a massive data set. You don't want to analyze all of them because they are not all of equal quality. So we have to do a lot of work to comb through the data. And we are trying to construct a 15-year database. And so far we have done about 10 years. We still have 5 more years to go. Because we want to do the panel analysis over a long period of time so we can track the changes and also be more confident in our cause and effect inferences. Now, but for this presentation, I'm going to use some very preliminary data reporting based on the surveys from the GEM, Global Entrepreneurship Monitoring, for year 2016. All right, now I'm going to show you three tables. These are all country rankings. Country rankings of, not country, it's economy. I have to be careful here because Hong Kong is not a country. Taiwan is not. So we have economy rankings of the 10 economies here. The first one has to do with the rankings on the level and the innovativeness of entrepreneurship as related to direct economic-based government programs. And then the second one has to do with indirect economic-based government programs. And then the last one has to do with what I call the societal culture. And you will see that there are really three things here. One is what I call societal respect. Do the people who pursue entrepreneurship, do they get the respect from the society, from the people at large? And then also we talk about societal norms and values, going back to Hofstede and all these other frameworks that we can talk about. Is it individualism or collectivism, and also uncertainty avoidance, and all those have been studied quite extensively. But the new one is the one about societal respect that I want you to pay particular attention to. All right, so with this as background, I'm going to show you the tables now, and we're going to look at the tables together.
So what are the direct and indirect?
Excuse me.
So what's the difference between the direct and the?
Yeah, you will see the programs. I'm going to show you those. All right. So these are direct programs or direct government support, giving you tax incentives, entrepreneurship programs to actually help you start your new business. And then on the other side, a range of policy like tax or maybe even give you some goodies for easy entry and easy exit. Like Japan recently lowered the penalty for failed businesses. Before in Japan, if you failed a business, there would be a very severe penalty. So that's related to a government policy support there. Easy entry and exit. All right, now just look at this, and then I will show you the other table. Those are the different kinds of policies there. If you look at just the highlighted yellow items, what do you see here? You see that the Asian countries tend to be quite high on government support. And yet, if you look at their innovativeness and also look at the entry rate, that is the level of new businesses created, they're at the bottom or bottom half of the 10 economies. So, on the one hand, you see a lot of government money pouring into government support programs among these Asian countries, and yet they're not getting their return on investment. The ranking at the bottom. Now, this is also true for the next table. All right, well, I'll talk about entry here, over here. Okay, if you look at the third column here, internal market dynamics, the economists would argue that one way to help the entrepreneurs is to make sure that you don't have a market dominated by 2 or 3 huge business groups. Like in Korea it's all dominated by Samsung and all these other groups. So that's really not conducive to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. So I call it kind of indirect support, is to have anti-monopoly policies, to make sure that the market is efficient. And then I also talk about market entry there. And then the third one has to do with the ease of financing. That's another argument in the literature is you have to provide financing in order to help entrepreneurs. Now again, if you look at the table here, what you see is that again, more of the Asian countries doing a lot more on supporting economic-based support programs than the Western countries. And again, if you look at the first two columns, they are at the bottom half of the group in terms of quantity of entrepreneurship and innovativeness. So instead of putting more money into it and then you get more entrepreneurship, it doesn't seem to be the case. Now, let's go to the third one. The third one is very interesting now. If you look at the first two social respect, if you will, items, one is do successful entrepreneurs enjoy high status? And then also does entrepreneurship, is entrepreneurship considered as a good career choice? So these two items I consider as a societal respect for entrepreneurship. If we look at these two, with the exception of China, the other four economies, well, maybe Taiwan too over there, they are at the bottom. And they are also at the bottom in terms of economy nascent entry rate. That's the quantity of entrepreneurship. And also the innovativeness of entrepreneurship. But if you look at those Western countries, they are high on those two dimensions. And yet, what I'm trying to say, they are high on those dimensions, and they are also relatively high on the societal respect dimension as well. So there seems to be a very positive association, if you will. The stronger the societal respect and societal support, then you will see more of the positive aspects of entrepreneurship. The less you have, then you will see less of it. Now again, this is only a case study of 10 economies, so I don't claim any statistical significance here. But the pattern seems to be quite consistent with the propositions. So again, this is a very preliminary cut of 10 economies. Just look at the indicators. So let me kind of summarize this. See what we can take a look at here. The findings show a negative association. Just look at the pattern. A negative association between economy rankings on the economic-based government programs and entrepreneurship, both in terms of the level and also in terms of the innovativeness. And then when you look at the societal culture as an antecedent and its relationship to or association with entrepreneurship, you see that there's a positive association. In particular, the two items concerning societal respect. Do entrepreneurs enjoy high status? Is it a good career choice? In the case of Japan, now Japan is not on the table here, but we have information and data from other sources that when a Japanese person goes to talk to their parents about starting a new business, particularly a young person, the parents will say, no, don't do that. We want you to work for Honda, for Toyota, all these big name companies. And this might be true in the Asian economies other than Japan. The face aspect of it is, if you don't work for a big company, that means you must not be very good. That's the last resort for anyone to start a business on your own. So that might be a reason behind it. And then with the exception of China, the other four Eastern economies also with low level of societal respect. Okay, but that's related to the one on the top there. All right. And then again, if you look at the five Asian economies, they spend a lot of money on government, on economic-based government support programs, and yet the yield on return is quite limited. Now, this is kind of a very tentative conclusion based on very tentative findings. Is the overall pattern of the results are consistent with the basic argument. The basic argument is that economic incentives don't seem to have a very consistent and a clear pattern in terms of magnitude, in terms of direction, in regard to its impact. And then societal culture is one that has not been looked at much, and now we need to begin to look at that as a alternative way or as an alternative factor affecting entrepreneurship. Okay, now let's take a look at the implications here, and then we will have a conversation afterwards. Well, the fundamental argument here is entrepreneurship is a very complex phenomenon, and we cannot just rely on economics as a basis to understand entrepreneurship. We need to broaden our base of theories and methods, if you will, in order to fully understand what entrepreneurship is. And then the second thing is that we do have to understand that there are different levels or different kinds of entrepreneurship, and not to just use that term to cover all types. Because as we are arguing here, the innovative types of entrepreneurship would require a lot more of societal support rather than economic incentives in order to spur and promote and encourage those types of entrepreneurship. Now, this is something that I've been kind of debating with my colleagues in the strategy area. In the strategy area, a lot of colleagues have been saying that, well, you know, there was really no rationale for the fundamental argument in the resource-based view of the firm, namely that there are differences in terms of resource endowments across firms. So there's heterogeneity in resource endowment across firms. But when you ask them why is that the case, they don't have an answer for it. They start with that assumption or that premise. Well, I think the entrepreneurship, particularly the typology that I showed you earlier, might give us an answer. And that is, you know, the imprinting effect of new business creation. It carries through. Those that survive, you know, they might have been started with only one particular value-add driver, and some started with two or three, and those patterns, if you will, carry through as they become successful, and that's why you see that there are differences or heterogeneity in resource endowment. So I'm kind of excited about this aspect of it when I talk to the strategy colleagues, but this is, you know, not really an aspect of entrepreneurship research, but I just wanted to put that on the list. And then another thing that I strongly believe in is that we have to do a cross-national competitive study in order to better understand the antecedents and the consequences of entrepreneurship. You just cannot just do a single country study because there are so many variables out there that might affect what you observe with a single nation context. And then the last one is just something that I want to repeat and emphasize, something that I said at the beginning of my talk. And that is, you know, we do need to expand our analysis of entrepreneurship from what it currently is, which is primarily economics-based, to include non-economic factors like societal culture. And there might be some other factors too, but this is a beginning of that conversation. All right, well, thank you so much, and time for Q&A, for feedback. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Maybe we want to go back to those tables. Yeah. I don't know if you want to take a second look at those tables. Yeah, take a look at this one here, see if there's something that you might want to comment on. Yes?
Entrepreneurship is not my area, so I might be asking questions which, which shows that I'm not familiar with the literature. You talk about the respect for the successful entrepreneurs having high status, so that's a new societal cultural dimension that you're talking about. Okay. So first of all, has that dimension been validated? No. It is still well, as a matter of fact, I created that term. The GEM data set, they just have a list of indicators, not indicators, questions. They
they have questions. So this is basically a survey question.
Okay.
So they have experts responding to the survey every year across 130 countries.
Okay.
And if you go to the report, you will find out how they selected those experts.
Yeah.
So it's all based on expert ratings.
So then my follow-up question is, the way that I see it is that if a person is a successful entrepreneur, typically that translates into wealth, right? And wealth in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and India are quite highly valued, let me put it this way, perhaps even more valued than in the US and Canada and Australia. So I'm wondering why Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, India would be ranked so low in it.
Good question. This is quite consistent too, across the 4 economies there. And again, I will go back to something that I mentioned earlier, is that maybe 30 years ago, before we had more people being educated to become professionals, and they work for all these Western firms, then people who created wealth in itself would be, the only thing. Exactly. Right. So
somebody that is wealthy will be, really big.
Yeah. So maybe now, there's another dimension to it. Is in addition to wealth, and then they want to also see that you are a professional, highly educated, high officers or high-level officials in the government or high-level executives in the government. So you're right. It's a little bit puzzling here. So we may want to look to dig deeper as to why that is the case. Why that is the case. In China, based on what I have heard from people who know about China, it's a pretty recent phenomenon. Before, I think in China, people would not want to highlight that they are entrepreneurs because they're making money. This kind of capitalist type of scene that you accumulate wealth based on your own business. But apparently, in recent years, the society is glorifying all the successful entrepreneurs, like Jack Ma or something. So. Yep. Now, again, we are going to cross-validate these findings with another set of data to see if that is indeed collaborated. But this in itself,
Yeah, because I don't even think that entrepreneurship being considered a good career choice, that would fit into the supportive norms. I would see it as almost like as a part of the cultural norms.
It is, right. But to me, the three are all, aspects of this larger concept of societal culture. But what happens is, if you go to the entrepreneurship literature, and you look specifically under supportive societal and cultural norms, most of the studies, they focus on whether the country is risk-averse or risk-avoidance, whether it's individualistic or collectivism. And there's a long-standing argument in the literature that societies that are high on individualism and also low on alternative avoidance will be more supportive of entrepreneurship. And that part is not really something that is consistent. When you look at the empirical findings, there are situations where you see that those hypotheses were not supported. But what I'm particularly interested in when I look at the GEM data set is they have these 2 questions here. If you're a successful entrepreneur in your society, are you highly respected? Or that is quite interesting. And it's on the surface of it. And then the other one is that do the society in general view you choosing to start a new business as opposed to working for IBM is a desirable choice. So that's quite interesting. That's again reflects the society. But it is not the same as on the far right column. The far right column has to do with risk aversion and risk orientation and individualistic, etc., etc. So certainly something to look into. What I would like to do is, as we move further down the road, we are going to have another data set to either validate these rankings or whatnot. But the theoretical based on what I have read so far, a lot of the entrepreneurs do things not because it is easy, but because they are intrinsically motivated to do it. I just want to do it. It's exciting. It's challenging. So when all these government policies focus on just the economics side of the supportive environment, then I would say something is missing. Particularly for academics, we don't go into this profession because of economic reasons. There's a lot of intrinsic motivation behind it. So I'm arguing that entrepreneurship is the same, particularly for the innovation-driven ones. And then if you go back to the other two, particularly the first one here, tax incentive. And a lot of the policy support and a lot of entrepreneurship programs. Now there are entrepreneurship training programs, educational programs, all kinds of programs out there. And yet, if you look at these countries, or the economies, they put money into it, but where do they end up? Still at the bottom of the table.
But I wonder, and again, like Rosalie, this is not my area at all.
Right.
But is it a bit of a compensatory effect? So governments will support entrepreneurship because it's lacking in the societal culture? Because, I would think, not being an expert on it, there's some relation between societal supportiveness and entrepreneurship and protection and support. But maybe not. I don't know what your data suggests, because it seems that where they have more support, they're not as highly entrepreneurial.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why we collected, 10 years data. We're trying to get another 5 more years to do the longitudinal analysis, so we know, chicken and egg, which comes first.
Exactly.
Is it because the society is not supportive of it, then the government has to compensate for it, so they spend more money, relatively speaking. Yeah, absolutely. That is something that we need to unpack.
Also, for some of the additional data sets, I was wondering whether you would be looking at something like the World Value Survey, because those are collected once every 5 years, for countries, most of the countries that would be included here. I think some of those, could be relevant. Hofstede's data obviously would be a little bit outdated, but there have been other studies by MinCont, which updates a lot of the, using the dimensions and modifications of these dimensions, which I think may be useful, because I can see risk aversion, for instance, or like the updated version that
absolutely.
in a sense to the willingness to take risks.
Absolutely. Let me have the detail of that survey. I'm not too familiar with that.
I think
I've not used it before.
Probably,
yeah. Because also
something that I can download from the web.
Like Engelhard does their I think they're just starting either this year or the end of last year for the whatever round of data collection is. So they have a very comprehensive data set which is downloadable from the from their website.
Okay, good. I certainly want to look into that. Yeah, this is very preliminary, very limited. Just by looking at the country rankings, of course, that's not desirable in terms of statistical rigor. But at least I wanted to see if there's some general pattern there before I engage in more elaborate analysis.
I'd also like to ask about the economy nascent entry rate. How is that exactly measured? Because I find Canada quite important.
Well,
so how is it ranked?
Right. Well, I can tell you that the World Bank also collected similar data, and the World Bank data has to do with new business registrations. So most economies, when you start a new business, you have to get a permit.
Okay.
So this is all archival data. So the World Bank has published the data across more than 100 countries. So we could correlate this entry rate is per million population or something, because they have to adjust for the population.
Okay.
Because in Singapore you only have 4.5 million or whatever. In China you have so many people. So it's not just the level or the number of new businesses, but adjusted for population. And then sometimes it is also adjusted for GDP. Yeah. So that has more to do with the adjustment the rate. And again, once we go back to the methodology section of the GEM report, there's a lot of information about specifically how they compute that. Usually what we use is using that as an indication of the level of new business creation, the quantity of it, standardized across economies. And then the other one, now all of these numbers, they don't follow a set scale because of different indicators. They have a different set of measurement scale, and then depending on how many experts actually responded to that question, and they have to adjust for the number of experts, etc., etc. Yeah. So, well, I think the big picture here is at least from a student of entrepreneurship, if you will. I would like to see more studies done that contrast or compare the impact of economic-based programs versus other type of programs. For two reasons. One is if governments are spending a lot of money and they are not getting the return on investment, then that's basically a waste of money. But most of the government policies or most of the government agencies are dominated by people who are trained in economics. Unfortunately, for better or worse, they just keep doing it. They just keep doing it. Very seldom do they bring in a sociologist or psychologist or even a business professor. It's all economists. You don't even see business professors there. So there's maybe partly a reaction to that. And I say, hey, look, we need more studies from the behavioral sciences.
I think another point that I'd like to make is obviously that you're using country data, so you're using aggregate, the country as a single unit. But I could see, for instance, within Canada, within Australia, within most of these other countries, you can see that there are pockets of people that would be more entrepreneurial. For instance, in Canada, I think immigrants tend to be more entrepreneurial simply because they don't have access to the same kinds of jobs that, let's say, a lot of locals would have.
Yeah.
There are bodies of literature that talks about the entrepreneurship rate among immigrants. I think certain ethnic groups, like you said, that Israel is very innovative.
Very true.
But if you look at Jews, virtually any of these countries that one can think of, I think they would also be very entrepreneurial in that sense. So I'm wondering, I know you're looking at countries per se, but I can also see that there could be a lot of international differences in that sense.
I agree.
Okay, so that there could be.
I agree. Yeah, it's the unit of analysis. We go to the city, we go to the district, we go to maybe in Canada the province, or in the US is the state.
Or ethnic groups.
Or ethnic groups, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
The enclaves, like, Chinese, Israeli, there's a lot. So it supports your idea that it's more of societal or group culture thing that drives it, because no matter where they go, there's always a Chinatown. There's a lot of Chinese entrepreneurship, regardless of the macroeconomic support.
True.
And I think this is true of a lot of other immigrant groups as well. I think, like in all the papers that I've reviewed, I couldn't go into the details of it, but was looking at Bulgarian, for instance, immigrants in London.
Okay.
And they tend to be a lot more entrepreneurial than, let's say, a local British would be.
I see.
Right? I mean, and I think, again, that stems from the fact that because they're immigrants, they feel that, they may not have same kind of access to, let's say, certain kinds of positions as the locals would have. And given their ties, their ties with, their country of origin, they might feel that this is a good way to expand the business opportunities. So I think, in general, immigrants tend to be pretty entrepreneurial, regardless of ethnic backgrounds. So you might want to do.
They are already adventurous.
Yes.
The immigrants. Yep, absolutely. One potential moderator is how diverse the cultural composition of the country is. The more diverse it is, the more difficult it is to make a generalized statement that this economy at the country level is either more entrepreneurial or less entrepreneurial. So Yeah, we're going to have to work down the level of analysis or the units of analysis and then bring in the aspect of the percentage of immigrants as part of the population in that particular district or that particular province.
Well, perhaps you can just, let's say, like choose some of these countries. For instance, Canada and Australia would have really high rates of immigrants.
Well, the high what? Immigrants. Immigrants. Ah, okay.
So,
all right.
if you choose cities like Sydney, Vancouver, Toronto, you would see that these are places with substantial amounts of immigrants. So you might be able to look at those vis-a-vis some of the other countries which would have less immigrants or some of the other economies.
You know what? Let us go to the third table.
Quite homogeneous as an economy. Okay. I don't think there are that many immigrants in Taiwan per se. Korea would be also pretty homogeneous in that sense. So you can more or less divide that according to the level of homogeneity within a country.
But Israel is very homogeneous. Am I correct? Israel. They don't have a lot of immigrants. Now, what I'm not so much surprised, but most struck was to see Australia at the bottom of the list on the right-hand side. And if I had not lived in Sydney for 3 years, I would have said, no way. Australia is more like Canada or more like the U.S. But I have lived there for 3 years, and I know. Yeah, I'm not surprised now. They are very conservative. They are very risk averse. The Australians. Now, of course, not the immigrants. The immigrants go there. They will be innovative, entrepreneurial. But I tell you, the Australians, they are very conservative.
I think it's not so much conservatism, but it's when a country has so many natural resources, you really don't struggle.
Complacent.
It's really a level of complacency, but for immigrants, for instance, when I think of Canada even, okay, Canada 30, 40 years ago, everything closed at 3:30, okay, but now you can see the stores open until late at night, okay, and I think a lot of those were started by immigrants, because immigrants know that, if they were to adhere to this culture of closing everything at 3 o'clock, they would not be able to make a living.
True.
So
True.
therefore they have to change the culture to a large extent, and I think that's what we see in Australia, and to a certain extent when I was in New Zealand, I find that was the same thing too. Like the stores were open really late, were always the ones that were owned and operated by
and also the social, what do you call it? Social programs provided by the government are so generous in Australia. Of course, the tax rate is very high. The tax rate, almost 50% there. Now again, if you look at Australia, if you look at the second to the right, from the right, as a good career choice, it's not that high. Bottom from the third from the bottom. Now I don't know. Hong Kong used to be a place where almost everybody is a small business owner. But apparently, maybe now the social respect is not as high if you compare to 30 years ago. Now that they
But I
want
think
to.
again, if social respect were translated into wealth, I think Hong Kong will endorse money, don't you think? I know that's a nasty thing to say, but
I don't know.
I think it's true. The extent of a person's success in life is measured by how much money you have.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Well, we should do a study of this, just by focusing on this. Assuming that they do rate it low, then the question is why? Is the wealth aspect got discounted now compared to maybe 30 years ago? So would they be, just using Singapore as an example here, there are many highly paid government officials in Singapore. And I think they tend to be very respected. So if you were to come along and say, I'm an entrepreneur, I make a lot of money from running this business, but then this guy has all I don't know, academic credentials and prime minister of this or minister of this and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that might make a difference. They are both, wealth maybe. Yeah, you might be right, if that entrepreneur is a multi-billionaire and you're only a millionaire, then...
Well, the Prime Minister of Singapore is the highest paid Prime Minister in the world.
Yeah.
That is true.
I have a question, but I see Doris' hand raised first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Doris. Hey, I'm sorry. You kept looking at the other side.
I see that Taiwan constantly ranked in the bottom half, but then except for the...
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Good career choice. Yeah, why is
I
that?
wonder if it's like echoing Rosalie's comment about access to jobs, because I don't know, Taiwan's the economy is not doing very well, so everybody starts to go into entrepreneurship or...
Well, in the entrepreneurship literature, there are two main types of entrepreneurship. One is what they call by necessity. That means, you can find a job. There's no other means of supporting yourself. So you just, do something as an entrepreneur. And the other is more the opportunity-driven. That means, you have the option of working, but then you see this is so exciting, I could be a successful entrepreneur. So you quit your job and then you start a new business. So you're right. I don't know, whether this is reflecting the necessity-based or the opportunity-driven type of entrepreneurship. The general argument is that in the more advanced economies, there are more opportunity-driven entrepreneurship activities, but in the poor countries, it's more necessity-driven. So if you look at it from that angle, is 2016. So the data were collected, 2015, 2016. The economy wasn't too bad then, right? If it were collected 2008, 2009, during the global financial crisis, I would have thought about maybe the economy is a factor here. But 2015, 2016 is not too bad.
But I think part of it also might be explained by the fact that if you look at Taiwan, Taiwan doesn't have, Taiwan doesn't have large multinationals per se, but the multinational, like the Microtex and like all of these kinds of companies, they're essentially started by entrepreneurs. So therefore, like when you think of success in Taiwan, it's not so much rising through the ranks of the government, because government tends to be, I think, less desired. So if I were very bright in Taiwanese society, I don't think I aspire to be, a government official of an economy that is not recognized by most other countries around the world. Let me put it this way. Okay. So I would want to be like one of the firms in Hsinchu, which would have all these microtecs, like all of these, like really high-tech entrepreneurial kind of stuff. So I think that might explain for his good career choice. So if I were a bright individual, I would start one of these companies in the Hsinchu area rather than working for the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of whatever. Okay.
Well, something to look further into.
Yeah, but I think if you were to look at Singapore, again, I don't know too much about Singapore, but I would say that in Singapore, let's say if a person has ambition, being a high-ranking government official seems to be pretty good, because until the recent fight with the Lee family, I think there seems to be a great deal of respect for, like a politician, right? Or the senior ranking official, so it's the kind of respect that people have for people that hold government positions. I don't think that's so much in the case of Taiwan. I think in the case of Hong Kong, again, it's less now.
Hong Kong civil servants.
Yeah, it makes a lot of money, but, now I don't think...
The image is not very good. Working for the Hong Kong government.
So I think it's a less positive image. Not from the standpoint of money, but less positive image of, like if I were a very ambitious individual, would I want to have a very high rank in that particular entity.
I want to go back to the other slide, because something that caught my eyes. I don't know if it caught your eyes. Hold it. ease of financing, the one on the right-hand side there. So in terms of money, it is really not a problem in, I'm surprised to see India that high, but I'm talking about, maybe they're talking about microfinancing. They're not really, financing large amounts of money. But then if you look at China, it's almost as available as in the US, 5.1 versus 5.5. Hong Kong, of course, we know there's a lot of money there. Taiwan is, well, I don't think it's about Taiwan. And then Korea is at the bottom. Now, I do know that in Korea, all these troubles dominate the economy, so they don't really encourage you to start up a new business. But then if you look at India, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, money is not really an issue there. It seems like that could not be a reason as to why they have less entrepreneurship and also less innovative entrepreneurship. So money is there, and yet it doesn't get translated into higher levels of entrepreneurship and higher innovativeness.
So the data on ease of financing for new businesses, how is this measured? Is it asking individuals?
Yeah, it's all experts.
So,
yeah, and then some of this is consisting of multiple items from an index.
But would it be asking people who are entrepreneurs how easy is it for you to obtain financing? I mean, so for instance, if my startup capital is very small, because I just want to open this little corner grocery store or whatever, okay, I don't need a whole lot of money, and I could just ask, this micro financing company to lend it to me, or I could ask my uncle or something of that sort, okay? Then in that sense, I might say that it's very easy, but if I'm talking...
By the way, it is not you, the entrepreneur, who responded to this. It's an expert who knows about the economy of India, who knows about China. There's government officials, there's executives of multinational firms. So they have a range of people who are invited, or professors, academics. So by the way, these are not people who were entrepreneurs who responded to these questions. They call it the expert Gen survey.
Okay.
And the expert is defined in terms of some people who have professional knowledge about the economy.
The ESA.
Yeah. So for example, a number of, venture capitalists in the country, and how easy it is to get a loan, etc., etc. Now, so I forgot to mention, these are not questions answered by the entrepreneurs themselves. These are questions answered by the, in quote, experts, government officials, maybe World Bank people who help that particular country. The World Bank has a lot of people who work on different parts of the country. So that's why, all the scales are different here. Sometimes it's, it's a 9-point scale, sometimes it's a weighted scale, depending on how many people they got from academia to respond, how many people they got from government to respond, and they weighted it differently. And they've been doing this for 10, 15 years now. When they started, people just didn't even bother to use them because it's very, very not sophisticated. But increasingly, they brought in experts to help them do their surveys and improve their methodologies. So increasingly, more and more people are now using this data set. All right. Well.
So the ease of financing for new business, if I can just take it a
Sure.
bit. So we made up of multiple responses to multiple items by these so-called experts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was thinking of, to be ease of financing is how quickly I can tap into a relatively large sum of money. So for instance, if I go through just one bank and I can get the loan approved within a 24-hour, 48-hour period. To me, that's ease of financing.
And also availability of capital.
Yeah.
Availability of money there, and then also how easy it is to get.
So again, as an outsider's, from an outsider's perspective, I think, just to go to an Indian bank to exchange.
Even on microfinancing though.
Okay. All day, okay. So it's just, I don't know, what exactly goes into the ease of financing. I would expect it would be very bureaucratic. You have to go forms after forms after forms, maybe 10, 20 different forms, so I wonder how exactly the ease of...
I suspect that in India, most of the entrepreneurship is still necessity-driven. It's really not an innovation-driven type of entrepreneurship. So maybe all these sources of money, I don't even know whether they use banks. You have read stories about microfinancing.
Yes.
Some come from the bank. Some come from some, I don't know, community groups. Like in Hong Kong, it used to be, family, not friendly neighborhood. They have some kind of I remember my mom used to be a member of those groups. Each of them you contribute some money, and if you're going to have a wedding, then you can borrow money from this group. And maybe that's what they're referring to. And something to look into. Certainly, the more developed economies have very different kinds of entrepreneurship from the less developed economies. So again, it is difficult to compare levels. And it comes back to something that I argued earlier. Maybe it is not a fair comparison to have India compared to USA, because when you look at the types of new businesses created in India, I suspect that most of it is more of the necessity-based as opposed to the opportunity-based. Unless you go to Bangalore, maybe then you can look at specifically the IT. So a lot of room for improvement here, a lot of room for further analysis. The fundamental argument still remains is I would like to encourage colleagues who are interested in entrepreneurship to bring the behavioral perspectives into the analysis.
I feel very definitely so. I think I would do the same.
Too much domination by the economists. Don't let the economists see this tape.
No, but I mean, really would be a combination of both economic and behavioral.
Absolutely. We need both. Absolutely.
So technically we know that China, although China is still a communist country, technically it's more capitalistic than USA. So how much influence does the Chinese government have on entrepreneurship in the business sector? Do they support it? Do they prefer that they do it themselves? There's now many big corporations run by both private and public. Like in Canada with 3 Ps, private, public, and
public-private partnership.
So does China have influence in those capitalists in China?
Yes. Well, in addition to entrepreneurship, I also look at innovation as well. And before I came here, I gave a talk at Stanford, the conference on innovation in Asia. And for that talk, I used a different data set. I used the World Economic Forum data set, and specifically looked at innovation as opposed to entrepreneurship. And then again, I had very similar country composition. Instead of having Hong Kong and Taiwan, I have Singapore and Japan, and then all the rest are the same. So I have the same 5 Western countries, and then on the eastern side I have Japan, Singapore, China, South Korea, and what else? South Korea, right? When I look at the specific indicators of what is called innovating behaviors on the part of the companies, China still ranks relatively low. Both India and Japan, India and China were at the bottom of the group of 10. So in a way, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of talk about innovation, but actually the companies are not doing what is required in order to be innovative. Let me give you some example here. Do R&D. They're not doing much of R&D. On average. Adoption of new technology is one way to be innovative, is use technology to help you do new things. And again, that's not at a very high level. And then the third one is, well, I have to go back to the data. So each indicator is a 3-item index. So in the case of China, by looking at the entrepreneurship data and the innovation data, my response would be, yes, plenty of money there. Government is, of course, the biggest source of money, but also there's a lot of private money coming into China as well. The challenge there is there are a lot of constraints on the Chinese executives, the mindset in Chinese firms, and then also government control that hold back the Chinese firms from being more innovative than what they currently are or can be. So again, when you go look at the specific indicators, then you see the picture a lot clearer. If I remember correctly, in that analysis, in that particular study, we also look at institutions, we look at infrastructures. So let me give you some examples here. Intellectual property protection is low in China compared to the other countries. Knowledge sharing and transfer among firms and also between governments who purchase high technologies and foreign direct investment comes in and passes along new technology to the local firms. Compared to the other countries, China is still relatively low. So on the surface, we see that a lot of money, a lot of government support, and then a lot of reporting in the newspaper. But once you look at the specific data, there are a lot of things that China are not currently doing compared to Israel, compared to Japan, compared to Singapore, of course compared to the US. I mean, it's a different kind of comparison. But of course, the argument is China is still pretty early in its developmental stage. Compared to Japan, Japan has been an industrialized society for 15 years now, or maybe longer. But China is still, the 30 years mark or something. So we can explain why China is behind. But not focusing on the why, just look at what they're currently doing. The data show that they still are behind on many of the things that they need to do in order to compete at the highest level in terms of innovation. It's a long answer to your question.
Yeah.
And again, I would not be able to tell you this if I only study China or only study China and India without comparison to the other Western countries. But the reason I wanted to expand the comparison is now I know, relative to US where China is, and then relative to Singapore where China is, and relative to South Korea where China is. All right.
Well, we'd like to thank Joe for...
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Fascinating.
Thank you for the feedback and comments.